Good afternoon. Welcome to Preservation Connecticut's Fall 2022 series, talking about preservation. Our noontime chats about everything preservation. I'm Jane Montanaro, Executive Director of Preservation Connecticut, and I'm pleased to be your host. Today, we are chatting about preserving land and buildings, and our guest panelists are Lefland, Connecticut Land Conservation Council, Vince LaFontan, Flanders Nature Center, and Stacey Vairo, Preservation Connecticut Circuit Rider. But before we begin, let me give you a brief intro to Preservation Connecticut. Preservation Connecticut is the statewide nonprofit historic preservation organization founded in 1975 by a special act of the Connecticut General Assembly as the Connecticut Trust for Historic Preservation to preserve, protect, and promote the buildings, sites, and landscapes that contribute to the heritage and vitality of Connecticut's communities. We are statutory partners with the State Historic Preservation Office, and I'm proud to say that for over 4 decades, we have successfully championed the protection of remarkable community assets all over the state by leveraging funding, forming partnerships, advocating, and promoting stewardship. Our office is on Whitney Avenue in Hamden, Connecticut. Shown here, it's on the National Register of Historic Places, and it's the Eli Whitney Boarding House. It has served as Preservation Connecticut's headquarters since 1989. We have a staff of 9 preservation professionals and a board of 21 preservationists from around the state. Staff listed here are always available to assist with inquiries. Please contact Chris Wiegren, our Deputy Director, for historic preservation easements, our bi-monthly magazine, Connecticut Preservation News, our Olmsted in Connecticut Landscape Survey, or to arrange book talks for his recently published book, Connecticut Architecture, Stories of 100 Places. Renee Trubert is our Making Places and Preservation Services Manager. Please contact Renee for information on redevelopment of historic industrial sites and tax credit applications. Jordan Sorensen, our Development and Special Project Manager. Jordan manages our communications and outreach to members through social media and email, receives and monitors demolition notices from municipalities, and prepares historic tax credit applications and nominations to the State and National Register of Historic Places. Kristen Hopewood, Development Assistant. Kristen manages all of the inquiries that come through our websites, provides member services, arranges special events, and is the editor of our Historic Properties Exchange, a free listing of threatened historic properties. And finally, our team of circuit riders, Brad Scheid, Mike Farino, Stacey Vairo, and Stefan Danchuk. They provide immediate boots-on-the-ground service to homeowners, developers, municipal leaders, nonprofit organizations and museums, historic district commissions, and more, with an array of preservation technical assistance, including community organizing, prioritizing maintenance and repairs, historic designations, funding, and archaeology. These chats have served as a meaningful way for us to continue our mission during the pandemic. We've been able to connect with the public and hear what's on your mind. Please feel free to use the chat feature to ask questions or ask questions directly at the end of the presentation. And of course, contact us afterwards for a call or a site visit. So I'd like to welcome our first speaker and guest, Aaron from the Connecticut Land Conservation Council. Aaron, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your organization?
Sure. Thanks so much, Jane. My name is Aaron Lefland. I'm the Deputy Director at the Connecticut Land Conservation Council, or CLCC for short. CLCC is the sort of state umbrella organization for Connecticut's land trusts. So we work with the 130-ish plus or minus land trusts across Connecticut, as well as a number of other conservation organizations, including watershed associations and conservation commissions and things like that. Our program areas kind of broken out into, I guess you could think of 3 areas. The first is policy and advocacy. So we are one of the leading voices for land conservation at the Capitol each year. The second is about organizational capacity and programs and education for land trusts. So we're probably best known for the annual conference that we host each year. This year we'll actually be returning to an in-person conference, which is really exciting, March 25th, 2023, if you want to mark your calendars. That'll be at Wesleyan University, and we host a full day of concurrent workshops and a plenary and all that. We also offer different capacity building programs like peer-to-peer networking for land trust representatives who hold similar positions, or board visioning sessions, all sorts of different things to help land trusts do their work better and more efficiently. And then the last bucket that we think about for our program areas is sort of the funding side of things. So we've recently launched 2 funding programs. We have our Connecticut Conservation Partnership Program, which leverages federal funding to help land trusts conserve land and get funding for those projects. We also have our TAG program, which is the Transaction Assistance Grant Program, and helps land trusts kind of kickstart projects or bring them across the finish line. So we're really here for land trusts and the conservation community for a wide range of things. We've got a great team. We have 3 full-time, 3 part-time folks that are here to help serve your land trust in whatever way possible. And so we're excited to do that today by partnering with Preservation Connecticut and talking about historic buildings and land trust ownership of buildings and things like that. And I will point out that CLCC's offices are located in Middletown, Connecticut, in the DeKoven House, which is another building on the National Register of Historic Buildings. So we have a small but not insignificant tie into today's topic. Thank you.
Yes, we know that building well. We've worked with that organization and provided grant funding there as well. So next, I'll kick it over to Stacey Vairo, Preservation Connecticut Circuit Rider.
Hello, everybody. So as Jane said, I'm a circuit rider, and that means that I am a field technician along with Mike Farino and Brad Scheid. And we really commonly deal with land trusts. I would say on average, we get calls once a month where we are sort of creating connections for land trusts in various ways. And this slide illustrates just a few of our recent projects. In the upper left corner, you'll see the Branford Land Trust's buildings on School Street. And I saw John Herzan and Lauren were here if they want to jump in and speak about that at all. But we have an RFP out to create connections with the land trust and a contractor. They have a number of repairs that need to be done on these buildings, and we have a portal now that sort of advertises the work that needs to be done and hopefully puts them in touch with the right people who can do preservation work on buildings. So that's a project that's happening now. On the right-hand side, you'll see 2 pictures of the Avon Land Trust barn at the top, which is a great vernacular structure, unlisted right now, not listed on any state or national register, but they are looking to get listed. And on the bottom, you can see the amazing artifacts that come with this building. They are, I mean, they're just like truly fantastic. This was an apple barn, a dairy for a time, and all of the apple baskets are there. There are stanchions for the cows that are still in place. I mean, it's just a real, the harnesses you could see here, carriages, it's just a really cool place. And they hope to interpret these buildings as a former farm. And it's located right at the head of a trail, and just there's a lot of possibilities ahead for this structure. And in the bottom left-hand corner, you can see the Greenwich Land Trust properties. These were given an award by Preservation Connecticut in 2017 for their amazing stewardship. So you can see how beautiful they are. They do a great job of keeping these buildings intact and in great shape. Next slide. So I'm going to really quickly run through just some tools that you can use and some of the programs that are in place that you should be aware of. The State Register of Historic Places is the first one I'll discuss. That is administered by the State Historic Preservation Office. The State Register is an honorary designation. It is approved at the state level by the Historic Preservation Council, and it's very important because it is a threshold for grant funding in the state. So you need to be listed on the State Register, and you need to be a nonprofit in order to access grant funding. In many cases, land trust properties are already listed. So if you want to find out if you are already listed, you can contact the State Historic Preservation Office or us. and we can look it up and see. But the person that you'd need to contact about the program to get listed is Marina Wisniewski, and I've got her information below. We also will put together a little packet for you. We can come out as a circuit rider and put together some information to submit to Marina so that she doesn't get overwhelmed with requests. We're happy to do that. So that's sort of the bottom threshold for funding. Next slide. The National Register of Historic Places, again, is an honorary designation. It does not in and of itself restrict owners from altering the building in any way. It does make owners of these buildings eligible for state and federal grants for preservation activities. And it does provide protection from unreasonable destruction under Connecticut law. The Connecticut Environmental Protection Act is something we can talk about if people have questions, but I'm not going to get into here. And it does allow for some flexibility when dealing with fire and life safety code compliance when you're rehabilitating buildings. And again, this is administered through the State Historic Preservation Office, and the person to contact is Jenny Schofield. Next slide. And again, I'm running through this stuff very quickly. It's all going to be recorded and will be on our website for you. So for funding, the State Historic Preservation Office, or SHPO, offers some planning grants. They're known as the Survey and Planning Grant, and they provide up to $20,000 to any nonprofits in matching funds for the creation of historic designation reports like state and national register listings. You can get a condition assessment of your building done. You can have feasibility studies undertaken to see how to use the building best. You can have engineering studies for structural soundness completed, and it also will pay for architectural plans and specifications. And the contact there is Mary Dunn. That's her email. And here is the big capital grant that everyone probably will be interested in. This is the Historic Restoration Fund grant. This provides between $500,000 and $200,000 in matching funds. Again, it's matched on a one-to-one basis, and this is a reimbursement grant. So you complete the work, you get it approved by the state, and then they will reimburse you for the half of that work. And you can use non-state funds or federal funds to match this. So if you have another source of federal funding, you can use it to match this grant. And really, you just have to own the property or have a 20-year lease agreement in place. You have to be a nonprofit, which land trusts always are. And you have to carry an easement or restriction on the building. And that is dependent upon the amount of money. The term of the easement is dependent upon the amount of money received. And the contact for that program, which is again administered through the SHPO, is Aaron Fink. And this one, the 1772 Foundation, is our grant. It's a public or private foundation that is administered through Preservation Connecticut. Again, it's a one-to-one matching grant of up to $10,000, and the eligible projects are listed here. Mainly, it's to button up the exterior of buildings and to make sure that they're structurally sound and just sound in every way. It will pay for some lightning protection and some fire safety and fire detection, but mainly it's like sills and foundation repairs and painting and just your basic building envelope repairs. Now, it's important to note that there is a letter of inquiry that we would like to receive from anyone who's interested in this grant, and the deadline for that is December 1st. So I've included the link right here. I think actually Jordan included the link right at the bottom, and you just click there, and it's a very simple form to fill out, but it gets you in line to be evaluated for an application. And the contact in our office is Mike Farino, but you can reach out to any of us. Next. And I'm going to go really quickly through why you should get that letter of inquiry in, because these are 5 projects that were funded in 2019 alone for land trusts by the 1772 Foundation. So all within 1 year, all of these land trusts received money. So the first one was the Wiantnog Land Trust in Kent, and they received $8,000 for some minor exterior repairs and to paint the exterior of the Smirsky Farm dairy barn. Now this barn is used to store hay and equipment, and also houses the really adorable sheep from a neighboring farm. So it looks beautiful now. The next one that we gave money to that same year was the Joshua's Tract Conservation and Historic Trust in Mansfield. They received $10,000 to do structural repairs on the circa 1750 Gurleyville grist mill. This is listed on the National Register, and it's interpreted and open to the public. If any of you went to Yukon or visited Yukon, you probably went to the Gurleyville grist mill. Certainly makes a lot of people interested in preservation, and it's just a great place. So they are in good shape now. Next one. The Kent Land Trust received $10,000 that same year to repair the roof and gutters on the Girl Scout Lodge. That's a circa 1920 property. You can see it in the historic image in the upper right-hand corner. And this building is used for various programming needs now in one of their preserves, and it will be around for years to come now. So next. This is an interesting example because the Lashot Farm and Preserve in Weston is partially owned by the Nature Conservancy and partially owned by the town. So 19 acres are owned by the town, and on that parcel there are these beautiful buildings that you see here. They received $10,000 to replace the roof on that carriage barn. And this is used, various buildings on the farmstead are used for different purposes, but it's to house some, there's an apartment, and that's also some classroom space and some community gathering space. And finally, we have the Coe Brass Mill Gatehouse, which was an adorable little building right next to the Coe Brass Mill Pond Dam, which was listed on the state register, and they received $6,500 to complete mason repairs and window installation. The Heritage Land Preservation Trust of Torrington did. Next. So that was all just in 1 year. So we have a very strong history of partnerships with land trusts. I think that can be easily demonstrated. But I just wanted to really quickly touch on the Secretary of the Interior standards, because this is the main tool that we use as preservationists at PCT and the SHPO to review grants. And they are a set of guidelines and best practices that you should just have in your back pocket and know anyway. And they were developed in 1978 by the National Park Service. They're available at that link below, and they range from preservation to reconstruction, preservation being the more strict guidelines and reconstruction being sort of recreating from historic documents. But I think you'd be using rehabilitation guidelines most commonly, but they are just a great tool, and I would encourage you all to become acquainted with them so that you can be good stewards to your buildings. So with that, I will turn it over to Vince LaFontan, and I hope that if you have any questions, you feel very comfortable reaching out to any of the circuit riders or anyone at PCT.
Thank you, Stacey. Vince,
Thanks.
for also, if you'd like to share your screen or
All right, terrific. I will.
awesome. Welcome.
Thanks, Jane. Thanks, Stacey and Aaron. I'm going to start by saying that Flanders Nature Center and Land Trust is over in Woodbury, Connecticut. For those of you on this program who don't know us, we're pretty active and big nature center and a growing land trust. We have properties that we have in our portfolio and that we preserve and conserved are in Woodbury, Middlebury, Southbury, and Bethlehem. But primarily Woodbury. Today, I'm going to be talking a lot about our one of our two flagship properties, I'd call it, the Van Vleck Farm and Nature Sanctuary, which is on Flanders Road in Woodbury, Connecticut. And I have quite a few photos that I'm going to be showing on things. But in full disclosure, though, I want to say that Flanders is very, very lucky because Stacey lives in the area of this of the Nature Center, and in full disclosure, so I get to see a circuit rider more often than I think most people get to see a circuit rider. So I feel special at Flanders. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and see if I can get this some of my photos up. All right. Can everybody see my screen okay? Good. Great. Terrific. So I'm going to start by just talking a little bit to orientate everybody a little bit about, again, the Van Vleck Farm and Nature Sanctuary, which is on Flanders Road, and where the Flanders Nature Center educational buildings and programs all occur. And I'm going to run through, I'm on Flanders website right now, and I'm going to run through really quickly those buildings. And then hopefully you guys will get a feel for the types of buildings, how we're using them. And then I'm going to focus in on two, we really have three historic buildings on the Flanders campus. One is a home, two are barns. And then questionably about another home, not as old, and where I am, our office. And then we have some newer buildings, and I'll run through them now. So first, I'm going to talk about the South Farm Administrative Office. That's where I'm talking to you from right now. It's a structure that's from like the 1830s, and it is been converted, and it is being used by the Nature Center and the Land Trust as all of our offices. While it does have a pretty big kitchen, and we do a little bit of meetings in there, it's really not a building suited for group sizes of more than maybe 10 people or something. So we don't use it too much for meetings. So really it is more for offices. Next I'm going to go to the North Barn. And the North Barn is a very large 19th century barn. And it's a actively used part of our campus. It is full of animals. Right now, as I'm speaking to all of you guys, at the North Barn, some of my educators, environmental educators, are delivering live virtual programs with second graders in Waterbury. They have, we do a program in which the kids are live virtual. We talk about some of the animals that they're seeing in the barn, and then the kids get to ask questions about it. It's a bit more to it. There's if one of my educators was in here right now, they could do a much better job than me. But it's a fun program that the children get to learn about animals. It's part of the next generation science programming. And so that facility, the barn complex up there, it's a pretty big facility, all sorts of small animals, all the way up to Shetland pony size, being the largest animal up there. It is actively used. In the summertime, that barn complex in the right in the barnyard, we have a large summer camp site that is there. And I'll get back to summer camp stuff in a little bit. Last comment on the North Barn is that the North Barn did receive a 1772 Foundation grant a number of years back to help that complex to roof it, to make sure our roof is in good order up at that barn complex. It also houses a small tool museum, farm-like tool museum. We have an art studio, a beautiful little building that's used for meetings and houses our founder, our original, Natalie Van Vleck, who is the founder of Flanders Nature Center, her art collection. We have a small trail house building on our campus that is used for children's programs. It was built in 1964. It was the first nature center building built on the campus right after we were founded in 1963. And it was built by the Junior League of Waterbury. That the club raised the money and built the structure. They were a big part of Flanders' founding. We have a wonderful, beautiful, you may only see structures like this, not too many of these structures in Connecticut. Let's see lots of them in Vermont and New Hampshire and up in Canada. But we have a very significant sugar house on our campus. Flanders was very lucky to have and still have a board member who, Bill Anthony, who was a builder in the area for many years and now is retired. But he was the general contractor and designer of this sugar house. It was built in the early 2000s, and it is used by both for making maple syrup during the syrup season, but it's also used throughout the year for programming. Right now, we have wreath making programs that occur up there. And finally, and I think most importantly, and the one I'm going to be showing some photos on now, is Natalie Van Vleck's house, the Van Vleck house, the family before Natalie Van Vleck, who was a Judson house. So this home, the Van Vleck house, was built in 1786. It's a beautiful colonial home. It is on the state register. Another former board member of Flanders, Ann Westerman, who I think is on the call right now, was very instrumental in making sure that property has been appropriately listed. And it is a focal point for the Nature Center. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when I go to some photos now and drill down into working with historic buildings. So again, I'm going to focus now on two of those buildings that I just talked about, the Van Vleck house and the South Barn. So the South Barn, let me see if I can get us to photos now. Is where I'm going to start. So the South Barn, different photo now. You saw a beautiful watercolor image of that South Barn when I talked about it a few minutes ago. But it's literally right behind where my office is. And it was a barn that was probably used for large animals, dairy barn, maybe sheep or goats. And we're talking about like 1830s, I want to think, or 1840s. We're in the 1800s. But really, the barn was not. It was used for storage. It really wasn't used for too much else on the nature centers prior to me coming. My predecessor prior to me coming here, Arthur Milnor, who was a longtime executive director of Flanders, when he retired in 2019, he actually said that if folks wanted to be generous and donate in his honor, it would go towards renovating the South Barn, because Arthur always felt that the barn really had some potential, but it needed some work to be done to it. So folks made some donations on Arthur's name, and the Flanders board made some investments, and without too much, and I can talk details about the amount of money involved, really we transformed this barn. We turned this barn from an old, very beautiful dairy barn with some limited work, we turned it into a barn pavilion, and I'll walk through some photos now. So we had to do some excavation on the barn floor. It was a dirt floor in there, and we hired a concrete contractor with a small excavator, and he came and he did a little bit of excavation of the dirt floor, and he removed all that that soil, as you can see, and there was some hay type doors that were on both sides already, but we hired another contractor who, instead of those hay type doors, you can see one of them in this shot with the O&G truck there, one of the doors before we put the new doors on. The contractor, Roxbury Cabinetry over in Roxbury, Connecticut, Brent Benner, Roxbury Cabinetry, he made sliding barn doors, and you'll see a photo of that in a second. We had to do a little bit of work shoring up the where it's a post and beam barn. So we had to make sure that we had good bases for some of those beams. So you'll see some concrete that's been poured and some shoring up that occurred. In this photo, you can see that we did some work right on the foundation edge. It's stone foundation, but we shored it up with a concrete base all around that. Here you see the concrete folks, Ed Cavallero with Architectural Concrete. He's doing his work, a short video for us all. See if it, not sure if that video is coming up on the screen. Can you guys see a video right now or not? Not yet. No. There we go. It just lags a little bit. So we had a very generous donation from O&G Industries of all the concrete. They're a big supporter of Flanders. And we poured concrete, and after we had dug out all that soil. Here you see one of these new barn doors for the sides, which were put on rollers so they could be slid to the sides, like pocket doors, if you will. And a little bit of photos on the exterior barn. You can see the stone foundation. Had to draw away some of the soil when we're shoring up things and leveling it out, because again, we're going to be putting this barn to use soon. So we had to make sure it was level for folks to come into the building. Here, the Roxbury Cabinetry folks are hanging those new sliding doors, the new pocket type doors. They had an innovative thing where you had two really big doors on one side of the pavilion, and they put a smaller door so you could walk right through it. If you only had to enter into the building, you didn't want to open the big sliding doors, you could go through the door in the door. Great photo, which shows you those beautiful historic beams up there, which is a really, when you walk into the barn, you see all these exposed beams. We hired a contractor to come in and take all the whitewash. He basically came in with a power washer and washed inside of the barn. Years of cobwebs and you know, the old whitewash and power washed in there. Didn't take very much though to clean it up, surprisingly. So here's a great photo, which it doesn't do you justice of the height. It's very, very tall, that roof. When you're in there, you have you see way up in there. Beautiful. Here are the finished doors. You can see there's been a track that's been put on there, and the doors slide to the side. They're on both sides of the building. And here are some of the fun participants who started using. Now, we did this in right before the pandemic and during the top of the pandemic. Flanders was one of those camps and organizations that remained open through the pandemic. I think we were one of the 20% of summer camps in the United States who remained open in full program mode. And we had hundreds and hundreds of children who came, and I really put this the barn to work, because the barn, when you opened up both sides of it, again, it made it into a very big open air barn pavilion, was a perfect covered campsite. So it fit right into Flanders' needs at the time and during the pandemic time. But it also and I'll show you a couple of photos here to its other uses. And this is on the other side of the barn. I've been showing you quite a bit on the one side, but this is on a field side of the barn. You can see this is a distant shot. But all that work has been completed, but it's pretty hard actually to tell any renovation's been done when you really look at it right now. But this is our annual gala. And we, during the first 2 years of the pandemic, we did a pickup of a picnic basket. And we used the barn as our site where folks would drive in and they go into the barn, and again, open air, wonderful big space for doing programs. But it was put to use as during one of our fundraisers, our major fundraiser. Here's a photo of it being used by adults. Here's Flanders Nature Center's Land Trust monitors doing a monitor training. I've got Dr. Priscilla Price in the back there, one of our board members and volunteers, and she's leading a conversation with many land trust monitors. Again, perfect big space. This is in the evening, so we slid the doors closed, and we did put some lighting in there. We had a electrician who donated his time, and he put some lighting underneath the beams. Perfect space for doing big group gatherings. I think I'm only showing in this photo like 2 rows of people, but actually there were nearly 50 people in the room when I took this photo. And just a shot at a different time of the year for you. Here's a shot during wintertime. The barn is not heated, so it's not used really during wintertime. But I do want to emphasize something. Frankly, really didn't change the character of the barn. If you look at that barn and you're driving on Flanders Road, I don't know if you'd really be able to tell that we put to use this beautiful 1800s barn by the work that these terrific contractors did. And if you look carefully right now, you're going to see a little bit of snow on two things above the sliding doors. Those are ceramic down-turned lights. You know, you may see that they're like old-fashioned. These are reproductions, really, but they give you down light. So in an evening program, and I have in the summertime some evening programs, we can turn on those lights so that when you're walking in the barn, you have good footing entering into the barn. Stacey, I think and Jane, maybe I'll do now is if, I don't know if you want me to progress right on to the next building or take questions about the barn or anything like that. Happy to do that if you want right now.
Yeah, I think this might be a good time to open it up to some questions, Vince.
Okay.
I have a question that I know Stacey has probably heard a lot, and we hear a lot. Land trusts that come to us with buildings that they're now responsible for, and feeling conflicted that taking care of a building isn't part of their mission, that they're really responsible for taking care of the land. How do you reconcile that philosophy of having these buildings to care for?
Well, so first again, I'm just going to emphasize something. I am a little bit unique in the sense that it's Flanders Nature Center. We were a nature center before we were a land trust. And these buildings that I'm showing are really important buildings for our educational programs. But I appreciate what you're saying. When I am part of other land trust specific conversations, I've heard that question. During my tenure, it hasn't come up. I know Flanders has, prior to me, had times when they've had donations of property that have come with a home too. And they have, in one case specifically that I'm aware of, they sold the property, the house part, they preserved the land, they sold the house. So I think it is a challenge because the cost, I can tell you from the Nature Center perspective and running the, heating and cooling these buildings and doing these renovations, it's not inexpensive. So it is there's a big cost consideration that needs to be considered. But maybe Aaron's actually a good one to ask on this question too.
Sure. Yeah. I think it's a case by case basis, and also depends kind of where the land trust is. But it's certainly something land trust can be exploring and considering. I mean, as Vince mentioned, there's always a cost that comes along with some of this, though with some of the funding we're learning about today, maybe some of that cost can be reduced. But yeah, I mean, there's some really creative things happening with land trusts and buildings across the state. We talked a little bit about that in our webinar 2 weeks ago. We have a recording of that if folks are interested. But just a couple weeks ago, the Salem Land Trust announced this cool partnership where they're preserving I believe it's like a farmhouse on some acreage, and they're working with the Southeastern Connecticut Community Land Trust to use the building as affordable housing. And I believe it's a historic structure, so there might be some preservation aspect in that. And then the land trust is going to kind of work to conserve the land itself. So sort of similar to what Vince was talking about, and finding a partner who might be interested in using the building if the land trust isn't interested, and making sure that partner has maybe a similar view for the conservation and preservation of the landscape, including the structures that are on that landscape. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting opportunity for land trusts, and one that you don't necessarily want to say, oh, that land has a building on it, we're not interested in this project at all. I think there's just creative opportunities and partnerships that could develop.
And Preservation Connecticut owns or has an easement on a property in Eastern Connecticut where we monitor the buildings on the land, and we partner with the Avalonia Land Trust, and they do the annual inspections and walk the land for us and give us, the report. You showed the photo of your land conservation trail inspectors being trained. I mean, we rely on the expertise of those in the land trust community to help us monitor that property. So it's a wonderful partnership, and we value that, and it really makes for such a strong preservation easement in that corner of the state. So I also wanted to make sure folks were aware that this funding that the state, the state funding that we're talking about, that all comes through the Community Investment Act, which is part of a coalition with open space and farmland and historic preservation and affordable housing. And so we work together with Aaron's group, every year at the legislature, making sure that we can advocate for the importance of this funding and make sure that the funding is still available to us through the state legislature. And all of the grant money for historic preservation specifically comes from the State Historic Preservation Office and this Community Investment Act funding. And Aaron, I wanted to ask you quickly, did you have any legislative priorities or planning that you're doing for the next session?
We do. I am not well tapped into that. Unfortunately, that's more Amy's wheelhouse than mine. I'm sure we will be coming out with our agenda for the coming legislative session soon. I think we're kind of putting the final touches on that. Yes. Unfortunately,
we're all just starting to think about that. Starting in January, we'll be back up at the legislature.
But definitely, I mean, protecting the Community Investment Act and making sure that those funds aren't used for things they're not intended to be used for is always a priority for CLCC. And that's also where the OSWA grant funding comes from for the open space and watershed land acquisition grant program that the state offers. So yeah, we're really invested in making sure that those investments go where they're supposed to go.
Terrific, thank you. Did anyone in the audience have anything they wanted to discuss?
I have a question, if I may.
Sure, go ahead, Dan.
All right, so all right, I think my question was already just partly answered, but I figure it's a good time to ask. But first off, I guess I'll just introduce myself. My name is Dan McNeil, and I'm a public history grad student in the MA program at Central Connecticut State University. And I am about to begin my capstone in the spring, which is going to be based on historic properties that are in the hands of land trusts. And what I'm going to be doing is making a sort of a guidebook, or Stacey Vairo, thank you to her, helped me come up with it. So, but yeah, I guess what I want to ask is if there's anything else Vincent or Aaron can speak on about challenges that are faced by land trusts in regards to ownership of historic properties, and are any of those challenges unique, and if there's anything you think land trusts still need to learn. And one more thing I would ask is for anyone looking into historic properties owned by land trusts, such as a grad student, are there any resources you would direct them to?
Yeah, good questions. I don't know if the challenges of historic building ownership are sort of unique to land trusts. Or I guess I can't think of any challenges that would be unique. I think for land trusts, it's just different skill sets in some ways. I mean, it's interesting that there's a lot of overlap in terms of like the annual inspections and like the way that buildings are conserved versus land. Like there's both of us have easements and things like that. But it is a different skill set in terms of like the upkeep and management. And there's running a land trust is challenging in and of itself. There's a lot to know in terms of real estate and law and stewardship and programmatic things. And I think adding the complexity of managing a historic building on top of that is sometimes daunting for land trusts. Not that it's not possible, as Vince is clearly demonstrating here. They've done great work. That would be my hunch, is just it's a different skill set, and maybe that's something that the land trust could approach strategically in terms of like bringing on board members who have those skill sets, or engaging with folks like Preservation Connecticut who have the expertise to bring that skill set that they might need for a specific project. I feel like there's a part 2 of your question, which I forgot though.
It was just so aside from challenges, is there anything you think land trusts could learn or take away, or what direction do you think they should head in regards to historic property ownership?
I think just being aware of the opportunities is important for land trusts. I think
That's
there's
for the contractor for a whole job
sort of
until they have done a mock-up sample, a good size sample.
yeah, there we go. I think there's sort of the traditional conservation mindset, like just protecting open space. That's what we do. We kind of worry about habitats, maybe trails, things like that. But a lot of land trusts are starting to broaden the scope of what they do, and looking at things like food systems or environmental justice or affordable housing. And I think historic buildings can be one of those additional opportunities that land trusts begin to look at. And I think programs like this, where we can just kind of talk about some of the challenges and opportunities and what it looks like, is helpful for those land trusts. So yeah, sort of like the more you know, the more opportunities you realize exist. And I do recognize that there's a fair number of land trust representatives here, just looking at the participant list. So I'd welcome them to chime in and talk about maybe what their experience has been, or maybe what they're considering, why they've tuned in, any questions they have about their specific projects that might help guide our discussion a bit.
All right, thank you.
Jane, if you want, I'll move to the Van Vleck House, because it might bring some more to Aaron's point right now. It's going to be a different kind of project to.
Sure, we have about 10 minutes left in the program.
Okay.
Do
All right.
give us an insight on the Van Vleck House, and then we'll leave a few minutes for
Hope that's not the
a
Van
wrap-up
Vleck.
question.
Yeah. So I'm going to start with this photo and make sure that everybody sees that it's press board that you're all looking at down below, because this was stuff in the basement of the Van Vleck House. But the Van Vleck House, as I said in my opening comments, that is really the beautiful historic building on the Flanders property, 1786, and on the state register. And it had been previously, it was built by the Judson family, and then the Natalie Van Vleck's family purchased it in the 1920s. And then Natalie Van Vleck lived there until she passed away, there in the building next to it, the studio. And then it was used as the home of my predecessor, so it was the executive director's house. But then after he vacated it, it was really not used very much because all of the challenges you have with historic houses, so much of it having to do with the heating system, heating or lack of things in homes like that, to use it in a way in which you could have meetings and for other reasons. So Flanders has, over the years now, has been slowly making certain upgrades to the home. And the greatest challenge here is it is such a beautiful historic building and such a focal point. It's right on Flanders Road, and so many people know it, not altering that beautiful character. So this is a photo of one of the first things when I became executive director occurred with the house, and it was simply upgrading the electrical service for the home. That was a project in itself. There was wiring from, as in many of these homes that have been around for literally hundreds of years, there were different iterations of wiring all throughout the house. So we upgraded the wiring. Next, it had radiator heat and painful oil burner, huge giant oil burner with radiator, would heat up water, and then it would go through the radiators, and it would sound like you're on a ship, and it would take very long to heat up the building, and not efficient. And so we changed the heating system. And one of the questions I think Dan had was if there were any resources out there. There are some private foundations who do care very much about, beyond 1772 Foundation, who do care very much about historic buildings. So there are resources out there. You have to look in your own communities. The Flanders did look to a private foundation to help us with some of the renovations. But we had to tell, the narrative we told was what we were going to do for that home, keeping it so as best as we could as its beautiful character, but also how we were going to use it. So what were we going to do with it, with the space once we had upgraded it? So that's one of the challenges I see as an executive director about when you're asking for money about this. What are you going to use it for? Unless it's just going to be something that people are going to look at, but if you're going to be doing programming there, you need to be able to tell a good story. So we did got rid of the oil burner, got rid of the radiators. That was quite a project. And we installed a very efficient natural gas system, heating and cooling, and really stabilized that beautiful building. All in the basement. It already had ductwork around in the basement from a different iteration. So we already had things in places. So we changed out and switched out the heating, and we added cooling. Here you see the oil tanks being removed from the back of the house. We had Wesson Oil come out and take the big giant, there were two giant oil tanks in the basement. They had to be removed. We had to do an asbestos abatement in the basement too, because there was asbestos around the pipes. The insulation around many of those old pipes from the 1920s or 1930s are asbestos. So you have to hire a special contractor to be able to appropriately do that, licensed contractor for that. Next, to make the building more accessible, we had to think about how guests were even going to come from the parking lot to the building. So we hired a landscape, a very, very talented landscape crew that works with a lot of museums, actually. And they took up, and I got a lot of photos of this, they took up the fieldstone walkway that was, and anybody cringing right now on the call, don't worry. All those fieldstones are okay. Don't worry. I'm going to show you where they are in a second. So they took up all those fieldstones that were there for the old walk. which was really because of years of frost heaving and everything else. They were all mixed matched and all discombobulated, not a great walkway, but beautiful stones. They took them all up and they prepared, and here they are right there. You see the field stones. They're all being reused in front of the south barn, back to the south barn project, with the entryways to the south barn. Those field stones are all being laid. They're all being reused in the same area here. We're all in the walking distance from each other. So they prepared the area so that we could put down a accessible walk, a natural stone walk. And here you're prepared for it. And let's see if I get to a photo which will show you it. Oh, that's in the back, showing you the propane, the gas line that had to be put in for the conversion. I'm going to get back to the walk in a second. The doors had years and years of paint. We have a volunteer here in Woodbury, Mel, who is just a wonderful restorer. He took our front door and took it back to its original wood and then repainted it, perfectly restoring the door. But this is a before shot. I think I have an after shot coming up. So we laid these natural stones, which made an accessible walkway at the appropriate grade, instead of those field stones, which were very, very narrow and that were there previously, so that folks could come from the parking lot and walk up to the house. Now, you'll see right here some stones that are, that's the edge of those stones I was just showing you a second ago. We received a small 1772 foundation grant, and to help us to make this entranceway, which was historically the main entrance of the house. It's like where you had a little kitchen garden in this hidden spot. This is not towards the road, but it's a hidden part, but the way that folks entered into the home long ago, which hadn't been used. There was a lot of water damage over there, and it just hadn't been used. So we decided we were going to put an accessible ramp in right here, and then redo these this area, the vestibule area, putting in some colonial style vestibule doors right there to reclaim and reuse that that entranceway as the accessible entrance. Now I'm going to show you, that is the entrance when they removed the all the broken things that were there, the old broken glass and things. And in a second, I'm going to show you how they had to, again, the landscaper had to remove some soil and different things that were right there. The side of the building, there was some water damage. So they had to put in some copper up against the side of the building as they prepared for putting in the ramp. Piers were dug, and I'm skipping over a big part. You know, this is a town of Woodbury. This is a change to the building footprint. So I had to get town of Woodbury approval for putting in this ramp, which I did go through the commissions to get that approval. There you can see the copper flashing up against the side of the house, and how they have tied into the home and made the appropriate level distance. And the ramp is coming to life, and the ramp is coming to life. And there it shows you that it is tied right into the side of the house, and where my cursor is right there is the way you would enter into the home. Inside that vestibule area, again, there had been some water damage, and you'll see much of the home, we had to put in some insulation. We're going to have to put a light. There's still a work in progress in that inside of there right now, but we're going to put a light inside the vestibule too. Again, making it more accessible while still keeping that beautiful historic vestibule. You can see these pointing out the beautiful glass windows. It's wavy glass. I don't know how old it is. I'm not an expert in this area, but there's when you enter into the vestibule, all that was saved, and it's gorgeous. And that looks into the living room of the home. Here it is. The ramp is finished, and again, when you enter from the parking lot, you walk on that accessible path, and then you enter onto the ramp, into the vestibule, then into the house from a different view. And I think I'm getting close to the end here. Some different shots of it from there. Okay.
Thank you, Vince.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, did you tell us where the funding came from for that?
So a small grant from 1772 Foundation, and then we received a larger grant from a private foundation in our area. Again, I just emphasize that with the 1772 Foundation grant, I have it right here, that we filled out. We really needed to show the whole picture. Demonstrate, in my opinion, we had to demonstrate what we were doing and how we were saving the character, that the things we need to do to keep that building in such a good place, but also to be very frank about the fact that we're using that building. These improvements are going to make it better and easier for folks to get into that beautiful building, see that building more, do things inside of that building. So it's a story that needs to be told when you're writing to either the 1772 Foundation or a private foundation that you know of in your area, that you really have to think through well before you start asking.
Mm-hmm. And that's how the buildings are best preserved too, having a dedicated use for them. Well, thank you very much for sharing your projects. We are at 1 o'clock. Last chance for anyone to ask questions now. And of course, feel free to contact Preservation Connecticut or our speakers today to follow up on any questions. And thank you all so much for joining us. Harvey, you have your hand raised. Go ahead, Harvey. You have to unmute yourself.
Okay, hope that's better.
Yep. Hi, Harvey.
I am Harvey Peston. I'm with the Newtown Forest Association, and we own a barn that was built in the mid 1860s. And it's in moderate repair. We've replaced the sill and the roof is good, but I have plans to turn it into a nature center, much like Flanders has done. My question is, when you have volunteer tradesmen offering their services for free, is there any incentive for them to take their services as a tax deduction for their services? If we give them a certificate of some sort to prove that they donated their time and services to us, has that been an issue that plays well?
So Harvey, please give me a call offline, and I can talk to you. I can talk to you in detail on this topic. So short answer is absolutely. Contractors can donate, and you can give them. You're a nonprofit, so you're a 501c3. So right. But there's more to it than that. I do want to emphasize something. I think I should say this just out loud. Contractors in my area are overwhelmed. They are so backed up, and the volunteer aspect of their work is much less than it was before the pandemic. So not because they don't want to, they care, but they are overwhelmed. It's a challenge even to get a contractor paying the contractor to do things. So right now.
Okay, well, I actually live quite near Flanders, so I'll probably pay you a personal visit instead of just calling.
Look forward to it. Look forward to it. Yep.
And Aaron put a link in the chat on a blog post on this subject too, so you can check that out. And someone else has their hand raised. I don't see a name, a number, 203.
Hi, I'm Kim Gregory, and we were just curious, if you said this, I'm sorry, but what was the total cost of the renovation on the Flanders, or the house you just spoke about?
Well, that's ongoing. I want to say the entryway, if I could piece some of it out, on the entryway stuff, I think the walkway, all those stones, all that work, all that stuff was in like around 16,000. And then the entryway itself was in the 20,000 range. You know, so 36,000 on that. The heating and cooling system alone was $35,000.
And I'm sorry, what system did you end up putting in?
We put in a propane fired hot air, high efficiency heating and cooling system in our basement. Now, we've also done recent renovation our trail house building, in which we put splitless duct systems because we're transitioning to solar on Flanders. So one of the things about the Van Vleck one is we can convert to all electric in the future.
Great, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And
Hello.
Bill. Hi, Bill.
Hello. So I work with the Branford Land Trust, and we are about to engage in hopefully engage in a large restoration, energy conservation, and historic preservation project with our complex. And so right now we have, I will say, ancient oil burning heat sources. And we're beginning to look into either air sourced or geothermal heat pumps. And I was wondering if Vin looked into those. He just said that he's looking for mini splits in another structure, but I'd like to have him comment on those heat sources or HVAC systems.
Yeah, so every building is different. That's the first thing I'm going to say to you. You really have to think about the building, and you have to think about the use. And yes, Flanders has spent significant time looking at all of the available types of heating stuff out there. And I think right now we're gravitating towards electric, and we're gravitating towards mini splits, if that's what you call it, you know. But we did one of our buildings very recently this summer, in which we put in those systems. And our deciding factor on that was that because we're transitioning to solar on this campus, and we are going to, we're just moving away from our oil burners. When I came here, everything was an oil burner, and now only 2 buildings are left with oil burners, and I want to transition them away. But with the Van Vleck house, the building has so many rooms. It's 2 stories, and it's more of a challenge. So the way to go with such a large system was with a propane, you know, using a more traditional natural gas, go that way. But you have to look at every building individually.
Yeah. And what have you done about insulating walls?
Yeah, whenever we do, so we're opportunists here. So if we do work you know, like I just showed you the Van Vleck's vestibule in the porch area, and the minute that we took out some of those, they were water damaged, some of those boards that were there, and saw it wasn't insulated, we insulated it. So we're very opportunistic about insulating things whenever we're doing other work. That's the first comment. And then my next one is that, again, with the electric systems, with the splitless ducts, you can program them. They are amazing. That technology is just amazing. So they do not have to go to high use. They will only use enough electricity to bring it to whatever temperature you need it to. It's not like the old ones that were out there. If you're someone who is familiar with that type of technology in the past, please take a look at it again. It's changed dramatically, much more efficient, these electric systems.
Great, good information. Thank you, Vince. Anyone else before we let everyone go? This is great, seeing 28 people on well past 1 o'clock. Thank you all so much for joining, and thank you to our speakers. We really appreciate you spending your time with us today and your expertise. And we will all be in touch and working in partnership going forward for sure.
Thanks, Jane. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Have a
you.
great day.
Thanks,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.
Thanks.
Come
Thanks very
visit
much.
Flanders. Come to Flanders and visit.
It's the best, I can say.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.